Okay, well, we're going to get started. We know people are going to be coming in because they're just finishing up dinner. Apologize for the delay. Should have looked at the time and saw that 5 o'clock is during the eating hour, and that's going to mess up somebody somehow. So what we're going to focus on today is specifically traditional medical issues and how you can eliminate them, and these are going to be trauma-based. So some of the biggest challenges people have, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with gunshot wounds or knives, is accidents, related to cars. Car accidents, impalements. Many kids have got impaled by bicycles. They wiped out, and now they have a flail chest, which is multiple issues with ribs being broken. That can be life-threatening as well. So we're going to focus on some kits to have and how to apply them. We're going to keep it simple. It does not have to be expensive. The vast majority of these items that Luke has acquired here, he was able to get them through Army Navy surplus stores. We found some Army gentleman who got out, and he had this entire bag, which is a platoon level bag that has the ability to take care of 18, 20 plus people. So you don't have to spend a lot of money, and if you can get them used, especially things like this, the hard goods, hemostats, things of this nature, you can put them in an autoclave and sterilize them, and they'll be just as if you bought them brand new, but you didn't have to pay $100 for, some of these exotics. And you won't need them per se because you may not be a medical practitioner, but having them, think about it. If you have something and your child is hurt, or you are, and you have the tool, and then you come across a veterinarian, a doctor, a dentist, can they work on your family? If you have the tools. But if you don't, you're expecting them to pull it out of their own stash that they may not have with them to protect your family. So this is your responsibility. It's not mine. It's not Pastor Dowell's. This is your family, and if you're expecting to go into tribulation without any kind of tools other than the Bible, you're going to need some help because you won't have the ability to protect your family because the tools won't exist. So these are relatively inexpensive to stock up on these things now. So we're going to focus first of all on an IFAC. That's the individual first aid kit. If you are on the gun range and you carry it, you should always have a tourniquet. This is what the military endorses. This is the one that passed the commission 3 years ago. And so a tourniquet is a way to stop bleeding. That's arterial bleeding, not venal bleeding. That's where it just comes out dripping, dripping, dripping. Arterial is when it hits the wall and sprays everybody. That's when you're talking about carotid, brachial, femoral arteries. That's when you get hit, you get stabbed, you get run into a car accident, or you get pinned or you get compressed under a rock, and then they pull the rock off you, and then you just start shooting. And you can die within 2 minutes, and even less, if it's especially here. Those are the largest ones and the most important ones because 25% of all the blood goes to the brain. So if you don't have a way to cut it off, and you can't use a tourniquet, just to make sure everybody knows. You can't put a tourniquet on this, period, okay? It's only the extremities, the arms and the legs. They have junctional tourniquets, but we're not going to go into those. So tourniquets are crucial to stop massive bleed out. It's also called exsanguination. You put it on there, and that's a last-ditch effort, because if you don't put it on, they will die. But if you don't have access to a hospital or advanced medical facilities, they may lose that arm. So the choice is life over limb. Is it better to have grandpa or dad or a child missing an arm or being dead and you buried him the next day? Because it'll be that fast. And so when you have tourniquets, and I'm doing a class, and I'm actually attending a class by TCCC doctors. These are 18 deltas. These are the specialists in the Army where there's no doctor. They drop them out of a helicopter, drop them out of a plane at 30,000 feet. They land, and everything they have with them, this is their entire medical package. And so if they don't have something, the person dies. They may not even bring in medevac. And so that's how crucial these things are. And you won't be able to replenish these other than going to the stores now to buy these things. Obviously, people are going to go after the drug facilities, the universities where they have medical supplies, hospitals, schools, school clinics, and you'll be able to get the basics. You'll be able to get an IED and things like that. So if you're near one of those places, and you work at one of those places and everything has hit the fan, I would definitely recommend you borrow some and put your name down and say, I will replenish this after you guys turn the lights back on. But if you don't, that's all you're going to have access to. I have an AED. IEDs are what you blow up on the road. AEDs are what you use to save people, okay? So that you can get them new and used. A new one, an AED is $40,000. You can buy a used one for less than $2,000. So that's the more advanced ones. The ones that you see in the, at big facilities, those are typically $500. They don't have all the contacts and the leads and things like that. So it's really basic. So with the tourniquet, what you want to do is you apply it high and tight. And there's the official technique that the government says is you do it high and tight. Because see, there's one bone here, and when you compress that, you stop the bleeding. But if you have a cut down here and it's arterial and it's spurting, you compress these two, you have two bones, and they rotate. Same way with the leg. And so what happens is you won't have complete compression, and people have died just trying to compress down here. That's why they say high and tight. But the military has the ability to medevac people immediately, and so that's less of a concern for them. In your case, unless you have a doctor, an EMT, a vet on staff or nearby, if you don't stop the bleeding, that person's going to die regardless. The heart pumps so quickly, and especially once you start, we can start going into shock and things of that nature, but we won't have time to do that in an hour and a half. But in essence, it's called compensation. Once you start bleeding out, the heart increases volume even more and pumps, and then you start to decompensate. And then it slows down, all the blood starts to stay in the interior and to the brain, and after that, it's over. You can put in Ringer's lactate, you can put in saline, it is too late. You have to have blood, the power is in the blood. You heard that many times, right? And that's the case. You have to have hemoglobin, you have to have all the clotting agents, it's based on temperature. You should definitely have, no ifs, ands, or buts, you should have a thermal blanket. You've seen those flimsy emergency blankets for $2. Don't waste your money on those. Just spend the $10. Get the ones by Sawyer makes a set, because that will allow you to keep the person warm. Hypothermia when people are bleeding is extreme. You can die even when it's 80 degrees outside. People have died on the asphalt in Afghanistan and Iraq, because once you lose the blood, you lose the cooling agent, and you also lose the heating agent. So people will freeze to death, and they're shaking while going into shock, and you're like, I'm sweating like a pig. And that is definitely not a kosher statement. I'm sweating a lot, okay? So the blood is essential. And when you lose it, it affects people start to get delirious. So if you're dealing with somebody who's been shot, the first thing you do is you disarm them. You take the knives, you take the guns, because when you start cranking up on these this is a cat tourniquet. There's other tourniquets. This is a SWAT T. There's a soft T, and there's another one that's like a rubber band called the SWAT T, and there's another one called RATS tourniquet, and that one is really good for children. If anyone who has children, definitely look into the RATS tourniquet. RATS. It was done by a gentleman named Jeff Kirkham, and he's an Army Special Forces guy, and it is great for smaller limbs, because this one is so large, when you try to wrap it around, if you try to, matter of fact, let's use Josh. Come up here. Just so Josh is Luke's son, and you can see how he has smaller arms, and even for you can use the tourniquets on, say you had a pet that their leg was severely injured, you can use that, but I would use a RATS. Look how much harder it is to use that, because it can't compress that much on a smaller limb. Whereas if you put it on high and tight. So this is what we would normally not use on somebody of this stature, but you make it really tight. Why don't you do it? So you pull it as tight as you can, so you can't put a finger under the tourniquet before you start wrapping. Okay, and then now you start cranking this down. It's called capillary refill. So you can do this right now. Typically in 1 to 2 seconds, if you press on your nails, you'll see that. You can press on your nails. Yeah, because You press on the nail, and the blood should come back. It should go from whatever color you have right now to white and back. Typically, 1 to 2 seconds is how long it takes for capillary refill. If it doesn't come back, that is a good way to check. But in his case, it should hurt him, so I assume. Is it painful? Okay, it should really hurt. He should be saying, "Daddy, get this off." But if he doesn't get that off, or doesn't get it on quickly, he's going to bleed out, and you're just going to see a pool of blood. And the average adult has between 4 and 5 liters of blood. So if you think about a 2-liter bottle of pop, and you can take it off now. I don't want him to start having tingling sensations. But think about it. And children have, in his case, think about it, 2 to 3 liters. So you may see. Does anybody have any bottled water? Let's hold one up. Let me show you. Nobody has. Earlier we had. Okay, so that one right there is a 2-liter, right, in your hand. So think about that. You have roughly, an adult has 2.5 of those in their body. And when you lose that whole amount, you start to go into shock. That's called cardiogenic shock. That's lack of blood. And so the official term of shock is not an emotional thing. It's the inadequate perfusion of blood. That means if you don't have enough blood pumping in your body, things start to shut down. When cells die, then tissues die, then organs die, and then the person dies. So you start dying at the cellular level, and that's why it's crucial that you have the ability to protect yourself on your person. So if you're on the range, just like having magazines, you should have your own tourniquet. Whichever one you choose is totally up to you, because, and just like the IFAC, that is your personal one. The military, they assign it to somebody, and that's for them. It's not for you to become the little doctor running around the field helping other people, because if you don't keep your kit up, and that's the only thing you have to save your life, and someone else is like, "I'm not giving you mine because I'm going to die if I get hit." So if you don't have it, you're out of luck. You're going to bleed out. Some people, especially you have medics in your platoon or your group, they will have extras. But I have multiples in my vehicle, and I've stocked up on these, specifically the cat tourniquet. But one thing I'm going to be buying a lot of recently is going to be the rat's tourniquet, because you can use them on dogs who have really small hands, and also children, and you can use them immediately. What you're looking to do is have a minimum of 1.5 inches, and you'll see people. There's some really graphic pictures of vets who were in theater who've died, and they were improvising. And you can improvise, but this man died because they had 6 different tourniquets that were man-made, belts. They use other devices. So if you have to improvise, that's a last-ditch effort. That person may die anyway. So that's why you don't want to have improvise. You want to have it. Matter of fact, are you active duty, sir? Oh, okay. I saw your uniform. I was thinking, is anybody active duty? Nobody? Anybody? That's another question I was going to ask you. Medical, anyone else in the medical field? Especially trauma? Excellent. So they still use tourniquets in hospitals when they're doing major surgeries, because they want to shun off the blood for that area. But these are not the same. These are not as thick or not as wide. Now, this is an older one, but you want to have a minimum of 1.25 inches, because if you make it too thin, you start to pinch it off, and now it becomes a ligature, just like they use for ligatures for choking people to death and killing them or decapitating. You want it to be wide enough so it spreads out the compression. In this case, up here, you want to spread out the compression as much as possible, and that's how it shuts off the blood. If you do it down lower, you start to break bones, and the blood will keep oozing out, and that's what you don't want to do. And so that capillary refill is not always indicative. All you want to do is get the blood to stop pulsing. If you shut it down so much that you cannot get to a hospital in time, they will have to amputate at that level, because everything downstream of it, it's called distal, of that tourniquet is going to be, it will start to die. So you're going to start getting lactic acid. You know, the body, if you think of the Krebs cycle, that is, the body uses oxygen and glucose, and that's an aerobic reaction, and that's how you have energy. You may have heard of ATP, and so ATP is essential, exactly. But when you cut off the oxygen, then it goes into anaerobic, and that's when you start to get lactic acid and all the chemicals. Potassium. magnesium, sodium, all of these natural elements start to build up. And then if you think, well, I'm just going to loosen this up because, and this is what they did during Vietnam. They would loosen up the tourniquet, all those toxins would go back into the blood, into the vein, and it would cause the whole body to crash, and they died. And because of that ignorance, things that they didn't know, and this was 50 years ago, thousands of Americans and allies died because of that lack of knowledge. So it's crucial that once you put it on, it stays on until you get to the doctor. There is a way to do a tourniquet conversion. We won't get into that. That's only been in 2 of the advanced classes I've done, and that's only because they were teaching people, you're the last form of defense. If you don't help them, they will die and they will lose their arm. So tourniquets are easy to apply. You put them on, you leave them on. When you do them on your legs, where's that cat? Oh, I didn't see you put it down there. When you do it on your leg, you do it as high as possible. Matter of fact, why don't you do this and I can talk, please? So you get it as high as possible in the crotch. And the reason for that is you want to be able to, you want to get it as high as possible. You have it on the windlass. That's this piece right here is called the windlass. That's what's going to twist it down. So back it off, please. Okay, and get it as high, even higher. It pretty much, and you make sure, especially with men, you have to make sure you don't put anything in the packets, because when you start tightening it down, they're not gonna like it. I promise you, they're gonna punch you if you put something else in there. Okay, and so you make it as tight as you can. Remember, you should be able to stick your finger under. It should be tight enough that you can barely get your finger under it, and then you start cranking it down. If you're by yourself, whether you got shot in the leg or somebody shot, you just start cranking it. You can also check the pulse by doing the top of the veins on the foot. You may notice because the blood won't be shooting out and spraying you in the face. And so you crank it down as hard as you can and leave it on there, and you'll see in here there's a label. You put the time that you put it on there. Well, they do that because if they have to fly somebody out and they're flying them back to a forward operating base, what's going to happen is they're going to throw them on the helicopter. Next person bleeding, he may fall asleep, he may pass out, and then they don't know what happened, how long it's been on there. And so it's crucial you put the time on there if you're in all capacity, so that whoever's going to help will know. Yes, yeah. So you should always have on your person in all medical kits lights. And like, well, I can see in the daytime, but who says you're not going to have a complication in the middle of a basement or in a culvert or at night? So you always have a light with you, and you may have to look inside a wound, and you see that there's a jacket or a bullet. You can take it off now, thanks. It has a heartbeat, yeah, but it would be painful. He would be screaming if I tighten it the way it's supposed to be done. It is that painful. That's why you disarm them, because you don't want to get those responses. So have a light, because you may have tweezers that you have to reach in and pull out that bullet and extract it. And you're like, well, why would I do that? In most cases, you leave things where they are, with the exception of the face. If you have an impaled object, you remove that because of respiratory issues. And so have a light, have protective PPE. You should have gloves, nitrile gloves. You can get them from medical supply stores. They're inexpensive. Get large, extra large, because even if it's only for your size, you may have someone else who's larger than you that is a doctor or that can assist you, and if they have it, they can help you immediately. In many cases, they don't want to get AIDS and all the other bloodborne diseases, so hepatitis C and all the other interesting ones. So have a light, have the gloves to protect yourself, and you should also have a face mask and an air dam. So when you come upon this person, you're not breathing in all the bugs, because when they're shot, they're going to be spitting blood all over you. Any liquid that they have is considered infectious. So spit, when people get shot or when they shoot, they have a tendency to vacate every one of their orifices. So they puke and they poo and they pee, and so you're going to be dealing with all of those liquids. So having a way to protect yourself is crucial. Now with the cat tourniquet, you put it on, where do you put it? High and tight, exactly. And even the 18 Delta doctor, Steve Pearson, I'm going to be working with a week from now. He's a trauma surgeon in Utah. And so he sees car accidents all the time. People get pinned behind a wheel. They get something through their head, and they're bleeding out. They bring him in the stretcher, and he has to deal with that. So he sees cat tourniquets and other tourniquets on a regular basis, and they're becoming more used by EMTs now because they realize how much it saves lives. So don't be afraid of putting these on. But if you don't put it on, most likely the person, if they are arterially bleeding profusely, if you don't do that, they're going to die. So you might as well just walk away from them because you haven't done anything to save their life. They may lose an arm or a leg, but at least they are alive. So I would definitely recommend having several of these. Every person on the range should definitely have one or two. Have them in your vehicle. Keep them out of the sun. The biggest challenge they've had in the military is UV damage. If they are exposed to the UV, they will start to deteriorate. So definitely take them out of the plastic bag they come in, keep them wrapped up, keep them out of the sun. And they will last indefinitely, and they will work. I was just thinking, is there anything else crucial I really want to address with the cat tourniquet? I would say, or with any tourniquet. Don't worry about conversions. And even with the doctor, they've had SEALs and Special Forces, they flew them out. They had one on 18 hours later, and they were still effective. But they also had the top medicine in Wiesbaden, Germany, able to resuscitate them. We won't have access to that in a grid-down scenario. It's going to be you and the doctor or the veterinarian that help keep you alive. And so they're not going to be able to do the really specialized medicine. So, but even Steve, the doctor, says 6 hours, you will have minimal, less than 5% after effects, as in tingling, nerve damage, things like that. But if you don't put it on, you don't have 6 hours to put it on. It could be a matter of the person got shot, they're bleeding, and they have 2 minutes or they die. So you should have this readily available. It should not be in your trunk, buried under all of your ammo, because it's going to be too late. By the time you get all that, that person could have lost 2 liters of the blood, and then they would have died. In children, they have even less, and so it's even more crucial for that. So now the next thing is compression or pressure bandages. This is by far the easiest way to go, and everybody can use them. This is where having the rubber gloves are crucial, or the nitrile gloves. And don't get latex. Latex is cheaper, but many people are allergic to it. So if you've induced an allergic reaction, you're now causing 2 problems. So I would definitely get that. They're not expensive. So this is an Olathis, and then you may have heard of the Israeli bandages, and these are hemostatic bandages. Those are awesome for people who you're bleeding immensely. You've already used all of your cat tourniquets or any of your tourniquets. You pull these out, and this is just like regular gauze, except for it has a hemostatic agent, which is a blood stopper. It produces a form of clotting agent. There's different versions. There's some that have chitosan, which is a shell-based coagulant. You don't have to use that, thinking about biblical aspects. There's another one called Newstat, and it's completely organic, and it is not shellfish-based. And you pull it out of the packet. Make sure you don't yank it out. So say this is a person. You tear open the bag with your gloves on, since you're not going to be getting bloody. Tear it open. You keep as much of it either in a hand and out of the dirt and out of the mud and out of the muck, and you start packing. You go as deep as you can, and you just keep packing in and out. You just keep shoving it down as much as possible. Then you do a compression. You use your body to hold it down, and that will stop the bleeding. And that won't have any impact on like a cat tourniquet, where if you don't do it, the person loses a leg. You can actually stop bleeding, whether it's a through and through wound on your arm. And these bandages are relatively inexpensive, $15 to $20. You can find them used. Not used. I'm sorry, miss. Don't buy any used bandages. You can find expired bandages at surplus stores, and many times it'll be expired 6 weeks. It may be 6 months. Would you rather have a bandage, even if the clotting agent didn't work 2 years later, And as compared to using somebody's dirty shirt or his jacket and shoving it into a wound. So this is still sterile, and as long as it's not perforated, it'll still be sterile. Now the active ingredient there may start to fall off if it's not been renewed. Here's another one, is the combat gauze. You can buy these on Amazon. This one is a Z-fold. Now, don't ever use the ones that they use when they were a form of these before, and they were the granules. That was an exothermic reaction. You pour these granules into the open wound, it would pretty much cauterize. It would stop the bleeding, but many times it would burn the person, and it is not bioavailable. So the nurses and the doctors hated it because they'd have to go in there and pick each one of those things. People got infected after that because they didn't get all the granules out, and they still died from that. So they've stopped that. That's not for sale. If you ever see the granules, I wouldn't say throw it away, but I would stick it at the very bottom of the case and say, I'm going to do that if we've already gone through 15 sets of gauze. So gauze is pretty simple to use. You stick it in the whole packet as much as you can. If you still see the bullet in there, if it hasn't shot out the other side, extract it, because if you keep putting your finger in there, you may hit the jacket, and now you're bleeding into that person's hole. Ooh. So now you're passing blood. So now it's a transfusion that you didn't plan on doing. So the tourniquets and, the gauze and the pressure dressings are easy to use. These things I would definitely recommend having. The catch, what I'd say is, number one, have it, practice with it. Do not crank it down as if you're going to, you can get trainers for $10. A real one is anywhere from $20 to $30. They're on Generation 7. North American Rescue makes these. It's the only one that's, quote, been authorized by the government for the last 5 or 6 years. The other ones still work well, and if you have them, don't throw them away. Just definitely maintain them. But if you have a choice, go with those, especially the newer ones, the Generation 6 and 7s. So this right here, a hemostatic agent. These are inexpensive. I'd have those right next to the cats because that will stop bleeding, and it says to control traumatic bleeding, external use only. So any hole in the body, you can do that. So in this case, if you have a puncture, whether it is a knife or a steering wheel or any other implement through your body, you can stick this in there and it will stop bleeding. But you can't use it. Remember, you can't use a tourniquet on the torso or the neck, so that's completely off limits. Back with the pressure. If you apply, it's typically between 10 and 20 pounds of pressure, you can stop bleeding. And if you don't have a hemostatic agent, this will stop it within 2 to 3 minutes. Someone's arterial bleeding, you can stick it in. You can see YouTube videos. You'll see the military cut a femoral artery on a pig, and you see this blood spurting everywhere. They put one of these in there, the bleeding stopped within a minute. But if you don't, and you have arterial bleed, pressure, and if you can't get a hemostatic agent in there, you can press down on it. It'll take 7 to 10 minutes to have that same blood clot form. So it is crucial to have something that's a hemostatic agent to prevent the bleeding from progressing. And this is just another one. There's Israeli bandages, Olathes. These are larger ones. Which one did you want me to open? Okay. Matter of fact, can you do me a favor and open, please? So that now officially that was sterile. And so you should be able to keep it in a cool location. Thanks. Yeah, so even though that was expired, he got this at a Army surplus store. It still has the seal, and you have a knife to open it. So we're going to apply it to your arm. It should be a tear open. And matter of fact, they learned a lot of mistakes during the USS. Was it the Cole? They were shot by a Iranian frigate, and I was in the Navy at the time, and so these guys, they couldn't get some of these plastic bags open because they were in the water, and they had oil, and they had blood all on them, and they couldn't get these bags open. So it was dismal to think that, wow, 33 people died needlessly because they couldn't open a plastic bag. None of them had knives on the ship, and some of them laid down right on top of their bunk and put this on their chest saying, look, you guys failed us. So definitely keep knives with you at all times, even if it's a small pin knife. Something as simple as that could have saved these guys' lives. So in this case, you know how to wrap it? Yeah. I'll talk and he'll do it. So this is This is an Israeli bandage. It's not officially made by the Israelis. They gave them that name just like French fries and all the other things. It's just I've trained with the Israelis, and they were like, we didn't make this. This is not ours. So you wrap it, you're going to stop the bleeding. So say the bleeding's right here. That little gauze has hemostatic agent. You make it as tight as possible. Wrap it 2 more times. And then what you do is you go through this windlass, and if you really want to make it tight, you turn it around and go the other way. Yes. So you twist it this way, and then you tighten it down. And then you wrap it one more time, and you just keep making it tight. So that'll give you sufficient compression to stop the bleeding, whether it's venous, or the vein bleeding, or if arterial. And so that's easier to do than using a cat tourniquet. But the problem with that is if it's a major blowout, you may still have to go back to a cat tourniquet. So this is your last ditch. If you don't actually get the bleeding to stop by using compression and using a hemostatic agent, and here in this case, this is just use a clip-on. So make it as tight as possible. And once you put on a tourniquet and you put on bandages, you always monitor and you keep looking at that. So we do a reassessment, you check for blood flow. So in this case, you'd be checking for a pulse. When you check for a pulse, you only use your index fingers and your middle finger. Don't ever use your thumb. Okay, very good, thank you. Yes, and so in this case, you'd keep somebody near them to keep checking it. And you would check a pulse, you only use the 2 fingers. If you induce your thumb has its own pulse, and that will lie to you, telling you, hey, he's in great shape, whereas he could still be bleeding, and it's coalescing under here, and then you'd still die. So you always check with just that. Thanks, appreciate it. And so you can also get stethoscopes very inexpensively. You can get them on Amazon for $30, $40. I would definitely recommend that. You can hear breathing issues, respiratory. Matter of fact, Dorothy, how often do you use stethoscopes to hear, a punctured lung, if you're dealing with a double lung pneumonia, things like that, raspy, the Rice Krispies, right? How often do you see doctors, or how often did you use it? Yes, ma'am. And you can also, if you have a broken bone or fracture, you can even hear that too. You can thump the back of somebody's chest, and you can hear if there's broken bones or broken body parts. If you have a tuning fork and somebody has a broken bone, you put the fork right on the bone, you tap it, that person will tell you that one hurts because you've just put a resonance down the whole body, and it will vibrate, and they will most likely either hit you or get away from you quickly because it works very well. So with bandages, those are inexpensive. You shouldn't have to. You should have multiple sets, and if it's for you specifically, and you and your family. I talked to somebody earlier, and I asked them this question. I said, "How many oils should I have?" And I said, "Well, think about toilet paper. How many times do you want to wipe? Right? Or do you want to just start going to trees now? Because you can always use the trees, and you can use comfrey and all the other ones. Or do you want to be in this century and actually have something that can be a little bit more hygienic and something that you're used to using?" So it's pretty simple. Get as many oils as you have for your expected group, and then some, because you're going to need medical supplies, and especially for the guys. How many bullets do you need? How much ammunition do you need? Oh, I only need 500. Well, if that's all you need, go ahead. That's totally your choice. If you think this is going to be an extended tribulation of 7 years, if 500 is all you need, go ahead, go with it. How much gas do you want in your car? I only need 5 gallons for the rest of the tour. Okay, you'll be doing a lot of walking, and Deep Blue will be a good friend of yours because you didn't prepare far enough in advance. So these things are relatively inexpensive. I would get them now while you can, inexpensively, because during Katrina, during Super Sandy, the Joplin 5, F5, or F5 tornado, you can't just go to CVS. That was blown away, just like Home Depot was completely decimated. It was gone. So you can't go buy the 4x8 sheets of wood to stick over your windows because that location is gone. Whatever you have in your preparedness is all you have. Now you're going to be one of the looters going out and getting all these other things. And the problem with going out and looting is now you become a target because they don't know that, hey, you're a believer and you're trying to help your family, they're thinking, hey, they're here to steal my gas. They're here to steal everything else I have. So now you become a target, and now bullets are flying your way because you didn't prepare. So it may sound callous, but you don't want to try preparing when the bullets are flying because it's too late. Just like UPS will not be driving. When Puerto Rico went dark for 6 months and they didn't have power for over a year, you can't just go down to CVS because they were in the dark all that time. So you have to prepare now while you have a chance. So these are the bandages. Here's burn dressings. That's less of a concern when it comes to the IFAC. If you're concerned about that, get those. You can use lavender, but many people, that's a concern, so they want to stock up. If you've ever been burned, especially if you're talking a large part of your body, you can go into shock if it's extreme. And when it gets into burns in your throat, you can die from that because it'll seize up the esophagus and larynx, and then you will asphyxiate, and many times it will induce anaphylactic shock, and then it's too late too. Now you're doing the crike and the chest tubes, and you are having to go in through the nose to get airway. So you remember years ago there was a thing called ABCs: air, breathing, and circulation. Right now they're more focused on hemorrhagic, bleed out, and then respiration, and then circulation. So bleeding is by far the number one reason why soldiers are being killed in field is massive bleeding or hemorrhaging. So once you've eliminated the breathing issue, then you start going into things like this. So this is a NPA, a nasopharyngeal. You lubricate it. It's for a specific size. You measure it from the nose to the throat. And then you decide you lubricate this. You stick it in. And if you do it right, it won't be painful. If you don't lubricate it, I promise you it will be painful. It'll stick. You try to get as much mucus and blood out of the way. You stick it in there, and you do that because the throat may have collapsed, and that's the only way you can get air in there. And so these things are effective, and actually the one that the doctors are recommending more now are the OPAs. I don't see one here, but it's a hard plastic you stick in the mouth, and that opens up the breathing airway. And so it has a tube, and you shove it in the throat, and it allows you to get access to the larynx, the breathing tube. Anybody know what this is? Well, this is Marcan. It's the cocaine derivative. All the cocaines are, the opioids, yes. And so this will not be available at the average prepper store. You won't be able to do that. You can't buy it now, so it's very difficult to get a hold of. So that epinephrine is phenomenal. So if you're bleeding and you have to go in and do surgery, would you rather have somebody do sutures on you after they've shot you up with epinephrine, or do you want to get straight razor blades in your skin? Remember I told you about clove oil? My son ran into a bookcase, bled profusely. And I came across town. I had everything that the doctor had with the exception of the epinephrine pen. I had the same exact brand of sutures. I had the same, everything is identical. And they had us on hold. We had used compression. Remember I told you about compression? To stop the bleeding. So I could have done it at home, but Mom would not have liked me to do a suture, right? I'm her boy, right? But think about it. If he's bleeding a lot, and the skull area bleeds immensely. It's not like you're going to bleed out of the head unless you get hit in the carotid or the jugular. In the jugular, the vein you don't bleed as fast as the carotid. Carotid, 2 minutes, you're dead. It's that fast. So in the hospital, the doctor had told me, I was watching it, but what I had done was I put clove oil on him because I knew he was going to get shot up. I put that on it, and it also killed any of the bacteria that was exposed. And he went down to the pia liver, the pia dura, and that's the next layer in the skull. So you have the skin, you have all the epidermis, the subdermis, and all that. And he started getting to the skull aspect, right? And so Mom almost fainted. So if you don't like blood, I would say now is the time to practice on YouTube videos and learning to get used to it. Because if you don't want to pass out when you're trying to save your own son because you're like, I can't, and then you black out. So now you have 2 casualties instead of 1. Okay, so I would definitely get over the sight of blood, men and women. And so with him, they sewed him up, and we use clove before the doctor even knew that to deaden the pain. Just like they shoot you up with clove when they do dental work. And then the next thing, we put the oils on after, and for the next 4 days, I kept telling him, keep putting on helichrysum, frankincense, and lavender. So that'll minimize the inflammation, but more importantly, it'll prevent infection. So he had no infection, and they gave us the antibiotics, and I just threw it in a box and said, here, we're going to go to natural way. We're not dealing with the probiotic issues that you're going to have based on antibiotics. So if you have any pharmaceutical needs like diabetic, insulin, things like that, you may want to persuade your doctor to tell them you're going on a trip for a month or 2 and ask for extras. Because all the insulin you have, and especially if it is life dependent for that person, how long will it be before a person will die without insulin if they're really bad? Do you know? How many days? Without insulin, people can die within 30 days. So if you have any diabetic friends or relatives and they don't have a way to keep themselves alive, with the normal way, they will die typically within a month. And it's a slow, agonizing death. One thing that's nice to know is that cinnamon oil is a natural blood stabilizer when it comes to. So if you can start using cinnamon oil now to bring your blood sugar problems down, and it doesn't have a shelf life. So if anyone has diabetes, I would definitely recommend doing it now. Keep the drugs that you have, share it with your doctor. And matter of fact, cinnamon is so effective now, the pharmaceutical companies are saying, hey, let's make chemical knockoffs of cinnamon. We'll charge hundreds of dollars for something that only costs $21, and we can get paid all this money. We know there's side effects, and people are going to die from the side effects, but we don't care. We're going to get paid $1 billion. That is how callous it is. So you can get something as simple as cinnamon and use it now, and I would say practice now so you have the belief, because you don't want to have an emergency occur and say, do I trust this? Okay? Because do you want to try driving a car with night vision goggles if you've never done that before? I've driven a car at 60 miles an hour with night vision goggles with all the lights off. Very first time it was quite anxiety producing. And then after that, we started doing weaves, and we started shooting out of the car. And so it takes a little bit of practice. And I'm not asking you to go do that tonight. And I know anyone who's a policeman would say, that's totally legal. You're right. We were on a closed course. That was a U.S. Marshals place. But I have faith in my night vision that I can drive at 60 miles an hour and I'm safe. And so I want you to practice the different things now. Make sure that the oils work for you. Get these kits and practice. Go. How many of you have been to a first aid class in the last year? Ooh, see how the difference? Yeah, you may have been to a first aid class in the last 20 years, but you know how many things have changed since then? So they're not expensive. And then you can go to a CERT class. Have you ever heard of that? C-E-R-T? How many of you have attended those? See, very good, ma'am. That's outstanding. And so it's not expensive. Most cases it's free. And you pay, yes. So think about it. The government is actually trying to help you. And is Ray here from Sweden? If you get a chance, talk to Ray. He said he got a note from the country of Sweden. He lives there. And it said, you need to start preparing and you need to have food. Since when do you get a letter from the government saying you need to prepare and you need to buy food? In essence, they're saying, we're not going to help you. You're out of luck. If you don't buy it, don't expect the FEMA trucks to come to your house with pizza and drop it off. That's not going to happen. So please ask Ray. His wife's here too. I met him 2 days ago on the range. And he told me that, and it just blew me away, that the country is telling him to do that. So anything that you have that's medication-based that you have to have for survival, come up with all sorts of innovative ways to ask your doctors to get more. And you can start stockpiling it and do first in, first out so you have it. But if you don't, whatever you need, you won't be able to get it unless you try to break into a pharmacy after the fact and then now you become a target. The security may be shooting at you, and now you're trying to keep them alive when you didn't even have to do that. So whatever you can do now to collect medications that are essential for your family and your life, do that now. Some of these small things, these are perishable. These are disposable, just like toilet paper. How much toilet paper do you want in your house? Okay, after that, you guys, you can start thinking, what are you going to be using to clean off your hands? Okay, so start stocking up on disposables for sure. I picked up an autoclave online in Colorado for $250, which was normally $750. You plug it in, and I can autoclave. And an autoclave is a sterilization technique that allows you to autoclave gowns, medical supplies, and you can reuse them. I'm buying hypodermic needles that are reusable. Don't get the plastic disposable ones. They're cheaper, but they're going to be one-time use. You throw them in the trash, and they're useless. So when you buy those, matter of fact, do you still have that list? Anyone who wants to have, I have a whole list that I downloaded from many of these classes that I've taken. I will email it to you. And it has IFAC, suggestions, and then it has the one for a family. And it goes all the way up to the company level. So you have 80 people you have to take care of. In this case, we're talking hundreds of people. And it says, it goes down the list of Ringer's lactate, saline, all the things that you need to have in there. So if you want to pass that out, anyone who his name's not on the list, I will forward it to you. Do you have that? Can you please? Because I want to make sure you have it so you know what you should have, and you can get many of these things on Amazon. But if you don't even know what to get, don't buy the boo-boo kits. That's where you have a Band-Aid. That's going to be useless in a trauma. Okay? What's the first thing you want to do is stop the bleeding. Then you want to make sure the airways is working properly. And then circulation. And so now if you start having circulatory problems, you can die. It may be in a matter of an hour or two, but bleeding can kill you in less than 2 minutes. And airway is the next most traumatic. So people, they get in a head-on collision, their throat goes against the airbag or gets lodged against a steering wheel without an airbag, and they've just ruptured their throat. So now you may have seen how they do either a chest tube, they go in through the lungs, which is a very much a challenge to use that technique. What they normally do is they will open up the tendons on the larynx, the trach, and then they start pumping in air that way. So if you don't have a way to get air to them, the brain will die. And it's crucial that you get oxygen. So having a bag valve, you can bag them. CPR, how many people have taken CPR? Raise your hands. In your whole life. How many have done it in the last 6 months? Ooh, okay? It's a very inexpensive course. I know you have. And so they found that chest compressions are by far, with mouth, is crucial. And you may think, well, hey, I'm going to be breathing into this person's mouth, and I'm going to be giving them a lot of carbon dioxide. There's only a difference of 2% between the oxygen in your breath and what's in the air. So you're not going to kill them with carbon dioxide. That's not going to happen. So you do the compression. I'm not going to go into the CPR, but in essence, there's I would recommend you take the class along with the first aid class. Very inexpensive. It's worth a night of movies, for sure. Because how precious are your children or your spouse? So I would definitely put that high on the priority list. Even before you buy another gun or knife, make that the next purchase. Because if you don't have that, you'll be. How many times have you been at an emergency and you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Right? Is that a good feeling? And it's even worse when it's your own family and blood. Right? I mean, you can roll up on an accident, you see your car flipped over on I-35, and you're like, well, I'll let someone else deal with that. But if you're going to be a first responder, you have to know what to do, and you have to get over your fear of blood and fear of death. And so having these skills now that you can learn when everything is perfect and hunky-dory is the time to do it. Don't wait till everything hits the fan and you try to learn, because it'll be too late. So when you're doing these classes, most of the classes will allow you to bring children. So they can listen. They may not absorb everything as much as you do, but if they're there, they're going to be learning something. And who says they may not do the Heimlich maneuver on you to keep you alive? And many children have saved their parents. So don't discount it. You guys have power too, okay? And so take the notes. They'll have the first aid kits that they recommend. The IFAC is only for you. That is your protection. So if you don't have one, you're gonna have your own complications. Will you need to get to this level next week? No. But I would definitely strive for that in your own congregation. And depending on how big your congregation, what is it, 9 or more nationwide? So I would definitely have something of this magnitude, and this location needs one even larger than that. Now, what time? 6:20, okay. Let me ask, what are some of the biggest concerns you have for emergencies, for trauma? Just, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes? Yeah, and that's one thing I don't have a lot of is, because we got to remember, these bandages that you're going to be using, once they're full of blood, are you going to reuse them? No, they're going to be in the burn pile. So it's biohazard. So you're going to be going through those just like toilet paper in emergencies. And we're not talking about every day in an emergency there's going to be bullet holes. But there will still be the incidents. How many people have gotten hurt since they've been here? We had one person, Brother Vince talked about somebody who had a spike through his foot. Okay? So just in the human trauma, people get hurt. And so by having these products available, it definitely helps you. About cotton, linen, yes. You always see me with shamas because these things can be used as a makeshift bandage. You can also use it for straining water, right? Okay. When I drive around America and I don't want to go get a hotel for the last 3 hours of the night, I will sleep in the car, put this over it, and this is phenomenal as a blanket. I use it to keep myself warm. There's hundreds of uses. Bandanas are good, but they're much smaller. I've even used this as improvised when I did a wilderness first aid responder class. We use this as a cravat. You wrap it up, put it around the shoulder, and you put the immobilized limb in, you tie it off, you duct tape it to the person, and then now you have a way to secure it so the person's not flapping around. You can also use it if you have a puncture. I would love to show you some of the pictures from this class I had taken in which a tree fell over, smashed a woman. Her leg was amputated. And then the next guy had a chainsaw. And of course they were drunk. It was like a picture. Here, hold my drink, right? This guy lost his leg because of the chainsaw. So we came on there, and this guy actually was missing a leg. We didn't find out later he was a Navy veteran who did this. He was a crisis actor. So he had blood squirting out everywhere. These people were freaking out. So that kind of training, if you have access to, will definitely improve your skills. So I took that. Yeah. Yes, I was going to give 15 minutes and be done. Oh, matter of fact, you want to pass that out? So if you want to get that list it's from the doctors. Yeah, let's do it on a separate page altogether. And so, I was going to say, we'll add it. So anyone who didn't have their name on there originally, if you want to have the list of IFAC and Medical 1, Level 2, Level 3. Level 3 is pretty much a clinic. It's like an ambulance that you have. You may not need to get to that level at all, but if you can contact your doctors or you have somebody in your congregation that wants to take that responsibility to help everybody, at least if they have a checklist, they know what they can start ordering. They can start finding these items. But if you're going to go into the apocalypse or into a crisis with nothing in your hand, you're just going to be a statistic. More people die from infections than they do from bullets. So it's crucial that you have some of these things. So I will pass this around if you want to put your name on there, and I'll email you this checklist that has all these different medical supplies that the military uses for theirs. So yeah, if your name's not on that list, but we will send it out to everybody, and so you can know which ones you can buy. And most of these things are available on Amazon. You can buy them from North American Rescue. They're out of Las Vegas. I took one of the classes there. We went to a building that crashed down. There was a little boy. He was in a culvert. We had to dig in there. I needed a headlamp to see him, and I had to drag him out. He had a fork to his face, and he was also bleeding profusely. So that was, they had a bag, and so it was a simulator. It wasn't the boy. So he was bleeding all over the place. He was bleeding all over me, right? And I had to watch out for the fork poking me in the eyeball. So that's how graphic it was. So if you can do that kind of training, you have access to it. You just have to take the initiative. I'm just asking you to do CPR and first aid now. Can we do that? Yes, I would definitely recommend it. Yes. Yeah, what are your concerns? What are your concerns? I want to make sure I address them. But burns, especially when they start, the hand is typically just the palm. That's 1% of your body, okay? When it starts to get to 9%, that becomes life-threatening. So when you have a huge burn, yes, that can kill you just as easily because you're going to start losing blood, and you're going to because of the burn of how much of an impact it has on the body, you will go into shock. It's called cardiogenic. There's vasogenic. There's psychogenic. There's many different types of shock. There's anaphylactic shock. And so a burn can be just as life-threatening, but the number of burns versus traumatic injuries is much less. So if you want to buy those burn gels and things like that, you can do that. That's not, when it comes to trauma, that's not the highest level for me. That's probably like 8 as compared to the things I've already addressed. Yes, you can always, a lot of the antibiotics have to be refrigerated. So you're not going to have it in your truck. And I do have a refrigerator in my truck, but most people don't drive around with a refrigerator all the time. Okay? And so, and I don't leave it in there all the time either. When I'm moving things, it's out. So antibiotics are good to have, but the advantage of the oils, and you may not have attended the class earlier, but you can use those oils in lieu of the drugs, and they are broad spectrum. Whereas, there's gram A and there's gram B. So you see the red stain and you see the purple stain. Those are 2 different bacteria, and penicillin may not work against one or the other. And matter of fact, one of the PDS, and it's going to be more advanced, but it has a list of all the antibiotics and what they address. And you got to remember, antibiotics do nothing against viruses. You know that, right? The doctors, 80% of the doctors will give antibiotics knowing that they have no application to a viral issue, because if a mother or a father gets off work to come take care of their child, they want to go home with something. They're like, I spent 2.5 hours in the waiting room and all this stuff, and you gave me nothing, and I paid how much money? So they give them, and that's why you have this rash of superbugs. If you look this up, the CDC director, the deputy director of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control down in Atlanta, said, we are at the end of the antibiotic miracle. We have no more quivers we have no more arrows in our quiver. We're done. So all these new bugs that are coming down the pike, you're going to be exposed to them. So if you don't have a strong immune system now, it's going to be like the pestilence in the Bible. They're going to be able to take people out needlessly. I mean, MRSA is killing 30,000 people in America. Yes, sir.
On that bad, sometimes it can be overwhelming when you know nothing about this. So if you had to say the first 3, 4, 5 things, get a weapon, get a first aid, what's the first couple of things you would say right away to get?
Tourniquet, hemostatic agent, bandages. What's that? Oh, no, he wanted 5. So I'm still thinking more. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, duct tape, you're going to be using that. And even if you have a huge hole, wound, you can put that Yeah. No, I'm saying you can put this over there, and if you have to duct tape the person, you just duct tape right to their skin. Duct tape will stick the blood, intestines, everything. You irrigate it as much as possible. And if you don't have, can I see one of those bottles again? One of the clear bottles? Can you hold up one of those bottles? Yeah. So think about this. Thanks. So you have, and this has CPAP on it. Wow. Don't do it. Exactly, CPAP. So if you needed to irrigate, you can use a knife, put a couple punctures in there, and you use this to irrigate. So you do a power wash. You can also put salt in there, so that'll be a saline solution. I'm not talking about using the saline to do transfusions, which I'll be doing next week, but this is what we'll be doing to make sure that the wound is clean as much as possible. Once the bleeding stops, then you pack it and you get them to the hospital. But this is a great way, and so you can use the water and things at your disposal now to do it. So what are the other concerns you have? I want to make sure I address those concerns. Not necessarily Q&A, but what are you concerned about? So you know infections are going to be coming down the pike in mass that even the medical facilities won't be able to address. Yes, sir?
All right, you were talking about superbugs.
Yes.
It's been claimed by some people that silver kills pretty much everything. But as I was listening to you talk, you may have already covered this, so I apologize if you didn't. But the iron guard kills bacteria and viruses.
Yes.
Pretty much on contact, correct?
Correct.
So would you say now, and they don't see any kind of like the antibiotics they have, they basically create superbugs. So does this target the entirety of the bug, or just piece of it like antibiotics?
No, if you use like thyme oil, have you ever heard of biofilm? Biofilm is the way the bacteria protects itself. They make a goo, it's almost like a jelly bean, and it protects it in there. And so your leukocytes, your phagocytes, all of your T cells can't get access to that pathogen. So thyme oil and rosemary will dissolve that film. And then you follow up with On Guard or oregano, and it will kill the bacteria. So matter of fact, Dr. Axe and Dr. Sauer, they have a video, and he talks about a nasal drip issue, and he goes in depth about how the biofilm is impacted by using thyme oil and rosemary. And so about the superbugs, the reason why we have it is doctors would give, and nurses would give medications. People would only use them long enough until they felt better, and they'll say, we'll keep the rest and we'll put it in our medicine cabinet. So now these bacteria have been able to morph. And every 24 hours, you can go from one cell to over 1 billion bacteria in your body. So if you don't have, it goes from, it may be 20 minutes, from the mother cell to the daughter cells for them to divide, and then now you have two of the same. But when they start to mutate because of pharmaceutical drugs, then what happens is they will tweak their DNA to get around man-made things, whereas the oils are not man-made. God made them. So they can't tweak that. And that's how the oils are effective against the mother cells and the daughter cells 40 generations down the pike. And that... And so back with the superbugs, there was a nurse, she was a mother. She got C. difficile, which is Clostridium difficilis. She got it at the hospital. She almost died delivering a baby, and she got it from the hospital. So if you think the hospitals are pure, sterile, they're not. I consider those places where people go to die or in the process of dying. So if you can avoid them like the plague, do that. The only time I go there, and when I get there, I'm taking On Guard every 15 minutes. If I have to bring my children with me, I'm taking it. When they were much younger, I would go to the hospital with my children. Now I can leave them at home because they're old enough. But I take those oils because I know there's stuff in the air, there's stuff on the tables. Do you know what the number one reason people were getting infected was the doctor's tie? They found out that when they were doing work, the tie would get on the body and it would transfer from person to person to person. And they found that was a major vector of disease causing was the tie. Something as silly as that was able to infect people and cause them to die. That's totally inane. Yes. CPR, that's the, when's the last time you paid for a CPR class? They're typically like $25 to $50 depending on the school. Some places it's even free because they want to get out the education, so it shouldn't be expensive. And the CERT class is free. Yes, at colleges, yes. And a lot of times they'll just do it because it's a public service, so they want to get more people into the American Red Cross, and they say they do it as a courtesy, saying, hey, we want to train you so you can help keep your parents alive and help keep yourself alive. You mean like internalizing, what do you mean? See, now that is a challenge when you're dealing with the torso, and that's going to be much more in depth, and I don't want to take up that much time, but I promise we'll address that offline, okay? Is there any other major concerns you have? Not necessarily questions about what do I do for this. Are you more worried about infections? Are you worried about traumatic shock? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. Get the largest stainless steel pressure cooker you can find that you can put on a stove, because what you want to get is 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. That will sterilize everything. The boiling water will sterilize it all. But if you don't, and I have mine is an electric autoclave, so I want to have a backup. I don't want to waste my solar on an autoclave, but if it's for my child and myself, I'm autoclaving. I don't care about the power. It's gonna, we can drop the whole system because that's how crucial it is for life. So yes, you can improvise, but get a huge one. Don't get one that you can make, 6 quarts. You want the largest one that you can afford. And if you find a used one, as long as it has a good seal and buy an extra rubber seal, you can put in gowns, you can put in everything, the bandages, the surgical gloves, all the instruments, the hemostats, the suture kits, all those things, you can toss them in there. 30 minutes later, you pull it off. As long as there's a thermometer on it, you know exactly the temperature. Those will be sterile. But you have to have a sterile environment to actually start doing the surgery. Yes? Definitely, because once you sterilize them, unless you're going to be doing the surgery right at the fireside chat, you're going to want to be going to have to take it elsewhere. So you could have those metal cans, the kidney cans where they put on all the metal, and you just carry it to the site. So yes, yeah, yes. Yes. So there's oral rehydration salts. This is what the World Health Organization recommends. Do you have some over here? Yeah, there's oral IV, but so yes, you can do IV, but the problem is, unless you are a phlebotomist and you know the proper way, if you go too deep, especially like in this wrist, if you go too deep or this way versus this way, you can puncture the artery below it. So now you've induced that internal trauma. So you can take a phlebotomy course. Most people aren't going to take the time for that, but yeah, IVs, if you need to do oral rehydration, that is by far the fastest way. There's also the enema is phenomenal for doing. Most people are like, oh, they've had to rehydrate children prevent them from dying. And so you do a water, very much like that bottle, turn it upside down, you hook up the tube to it, and you put it in a lubricated tube, and you rehydrate the child that way. And so adults, and these they're called oral rehydration salts. It's in essence sugar and water. You can find that free online. You don't have to buy the special ones. As long as it's pure water, and even especially when it's the suppository, you don't have to worry about or the enema. You don't have to even worry about if it's sterile. As long as it's clean water and you don't have giardia swimming in there, it doesn't have to be chlorinated. You can actually insert it that way because you got to remember it's already in inside your intestinal tract. You're less concerned about them getting infection than dying of dehydration, because dehydration is crucial of redeeming. So I'd love to answer more questions, so let's do this. I want to address any of these questions, but out of respect, I want to make sure everybody can go down to tonight's events, and I don't want to impose on that.
Just for the record on the camera, can you state the three classes and names that you recommend for them to
Yes, sir. I would definitely recommend the first aid class and the CPR. And if you can take CERT, it's free. Look it up, CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. I haven't taken it in a year and a half because I've been going to all these other trainings. And so it was very good. They have ham radio, they have medical. So I would definitely recommend those three. They're very inexpensive. Most cases you can have children attend the class as well. And then what's nice about the oils, they're very small and compact. So you can have a whole pack of oils right inside your bag, and I have it in my bag at home, and I have those emergency oils. So I can apply to a wound to prevent infection, because the first thing they do when you get shot in theater right now is they give you Mobic, M-O-B-I-C, and that's a combination of antibiotics, and that already starts. And they found out the amount of infection has dropped 98% because of giving them Mobic right after being shot. So if something is that important that they're mandating, even before we put even before they start putting on a cat tourniquet, they give you this because they don't want you to get infected. You survive now this, and now you die of infection. So that is crucial because remember, every 20 minutes, another batch of bacteria are breeding in you. And so it is crucial to have that. So I do want to answer any other questions. If you have personal ones, come on up here, and we'll talk about the brass tacks up here, and we'll make sure you can get that email if you didn't put your name on there to have all these kits. So come on up here. Thank you very much, folks.